David A. Charles, and we have the beautiful
Amy Lee Martin. We're going to nail this intro soon, babe.
This is a podcast that's specifically created to help you create healthy, secure, passionate relationships in the modern world. And this is episode 3, and we're going to be diving into part 2 of our love story. So for those of you that listened to the first one, welcome back. We're kind of creating, I see this as like each part being a standalone as well. Because there are going to be different topics that we're covering in each one. There's different themes in each part. So for those of you that listened to part 1, we left you with me arriving into Adelaide. And so this next part, without giving too much away, we're really going to be exploring the period of time with myself in Adelaide and all the bits and pieces that came up for us as individuals through that. And just giving insights around our journey around that. Do you have anything else to say, my love, on that?
I feel like this is where we're going to get the real. You're going to really get to start to see a picture of how the word that's here is chaotic things got for us, and leading us to some really big decisions in really an attempt to save our relationship, our sanity and our relationship. And I feel like this episode is really starting to build the picture of the lowest points, which for me just feels so powerful. And as we connected yesterday before doing this recording, writing out a list of some of those key moments and key things that we went through, I just felt this I don't even really have a word, but astonishment that we are here together so deeply, not just in love, but so deeply united as a couple. The entity of our relationship is so thriving, and it somewhat feels miraculous when you look at some of the things that we experienced. So I'm really excited about sharing this because I think that it really not just gives people hope, but gives people a transmission of their own courage and tenacity and strength. And I'm really looking forward to the medicine of this story making its way into the hearts of people and into their relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. This episode, as you said, this episode's really going to explore some of the rawness and some of the deepest points of healing that we encountered. And we both had different parts. There were some similarities, but there were also some big differences. And one of my intentions, just hearing you say that, is actually just to bring a sense of acceptance for people that are moving through challenging times, and to bring some different perspectives and some different mindsets into challenges in relationships, because it's so easy in this very short-term focused society to, when challenges pop up into relationships, to think, okay, it's time to move on or start looking for other options. And I'm being mindful about jumping into some of those options, but there's such deep healing when we move into relationships with that perspective that there are going to be challenges. And anyway.
So let's also talk about how we're on Zoom right now. So for those watching the video, you can see that Dave and I are not in the same location. For those listening along on Spotify, you can just hear us, but we are currently in separate states. Dave is in Melbourne, Victoria, and I'm in Adelaide, South Australia. And we're not going to give too much away about all of that yet, because next episode we'll be really diving into that a little more and sharing that with you more. So this is a slightly different dynamic for us, recording on Zoom rather than being in each other's physical space and being able to feel each other. And I am I'm excited to see what that feels like when we're in person, we can obviously feel each other a little more deeply. So yeah, this will be great. And it's so reminiscent of where our love began, my love.
Yeah, totally. And you'll just have to stay tuned to part 3 to hear more about
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
We are expert Zoomers.
Yes, we are. We definitely are.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. So similar to last time, we're going to run through key events, and then we'll kind of dive into realizations that we had along the way. Yeah. So would you love to kick us off, my love, and sort of like the first point, in this part 2?
Yeah, sure. So as Dave briefly mentioned, where we left you off in the last episode was Dave arriving to Adelaide from Melbourne and deciding that he was going to be spending a lot more time there. And we did briefly mention as well that I was running a large event in that January of 2021, and Dave was a guest speaker in that. And after that event, that was huge for me. That event was huge and hugely expansive. There was over 100 people in the room, and it was a huge coordination effort. And some different things happened through the course of that event, some different interactions with some people, and I had a huge emotional crash after that. Which, I feel really content with, because something that I really honor and practice is knowing that after we have huge heart expansion, it's very normal for us to have contraction. And with the bigger the expansion, the bigger the contraction can sometimes be. But I suppose what it kickstarted was a bit of a series of events that really began to, I'm being very conscious of my language, because it wasn't all doom and gloom. And we know now, looking back, that it was really purposeful, but it really, it began to polish us and excavate deeper things in our relationship and how we were going to connect together and support each other through difficult times. So yeah, I just started going through a lot of stuff. I was also really overwhelmed or adjusting to you being in Adelaide. It was a lot for me. We did mention as well about the independence and how we were both really good at being independent. Well, this little 2-bedroom unit that I was my little haven, this incredibly amazing man who I was so grateful for. I couldn't believe my lucky stars that not only had I met you and that you were wonderful, but that you loved me so much that you'd moved to Adelaide. But we were crammed into this tiny little matchbox, and it was a lot. It was a lot, and it was a lot for both of us. And so, yeah, what are your reflections of that initial time and what began to unfold for us?
Yeah, so I was just saying that as we love that the 3-stage model, or the 3 component model of codependence, independence, interdependence, and we'd speak about that a lot. And both previously being more like having codependent patterns, and then moving into independence, and then coming together. Like, I noticed for myself that I was really swinging between, like, I was trying to find that balance of interdependence, but I was also swinging in from independence, unhealthy, unresourceful independence, to codependence. So there was this swing, and there was this looking for equilibrium, and then put that on top of the little beautiful matchbox that we had of a place. It was challenging. It was challenging for us to have our own resourceful space.
Yeah.
And just to find that nice healthy balance of interdependence. And we both just had so many challenges coming up, which we'll dive into as well.
Yeah.
But so many old patterns and beliefs and ways of being that weren't healed. That, like, one of the important things that I realized is that I was working a lot on relationships when I was single, and it's a whole other thing to work on relationships when you're in a relationship, because there are so many parts that just aren't going to come up. we heal so deeply when we are in relationship. And yeah.
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned that, because it's something that gets thrown around quite a lot on social media, and we always see memes about it. And you see memes and texty quotes on both sides of the fence, both that you do the work in the relationship and heal, like, work on yourself to then get into the relationship. And both are true. both are actually true. And I think that what I would encourage people to do is to hold both of those as truth, because when you only want to pick one or the other, that's the mind trying to separate. The mind doesn't necessarily default to trying to hold two truths at once. It will cling to one truth so that there can be a right and a wrong, as opposed to holding both truths, because it's true. We both had done so much personal work as when we were single to prepare us for this relationship, and actually being in the relationship, you still have to keep doing that work. You don't just get into the relationship and, hey presto, here it is. And I think that's something that I was cognitively aware of, because I loved you so much when we were in that initial phase before we'd met. I remember saying to a friend of mine, fuck, I don't know how I'm going to be able to be this person when I'm in Dave's presence, like almost how to take all of the things that we've spoken about of what we would desire in a relationship and actually live them, knowing that it was going to be a whole different thing. And it was very, very different. And I learned a lot of grace and acceptance of myself through that. And yeah, that feels complete for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually just had this mindset of when there were challenges, that there was part of me that was saying to myself, I need to spend more time by myself to heal this so it doesn't pop up again. And it's not, that's an illusion. That's just the ego. That my experience was that in that moment, that was just my ego. That was just my ego.
Yeah. And I guess I was running so many abandonment stories that I was so desperate for there to be this smoothness that you were asking for, that I would try and, I suppose, falsify smoothness to not push you away, because I could obviously feel this tendency that you were running of, I need to pull back, I need to go and be by myself, rather than what we know now is to both come in even closer in those moments and actually support each other in those times.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like I just remember this feeling of like pressure of having to perfect, and not actually allowing it to be a little clunky, and to really honor that process of working it out and figuring it out. I just wanted to be perfect for you, to not lose you.
I was also leading that though. I was also leading the perspective that it needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
It was a lot of what I was, there was a lot, like a strong part of me that was the message that I was giving as well.
Yeah, it was strong. It was hard. That sent me a little crazy.
Yeah. And like as you and I have spoken about, that really comes from also just like my own upbringing as well, and not believing that change is possible.
Yes.
And not believing that there's willingness, that there's actually going to be like the change that I'm asking for. So there was like a hyper sensitivity to moments when things weren't great or
I something I just want to presence that I know a lot of people listening to this have probably experienced or experience. Which part goes first? So something that I always say is that life is the experiential vehicle that is taking you to know yourself more deeply. that all of the experiences that arrive to us in our life are brought to us, for the purpose of us understanding and knowing and ultimately loving ourselves wholly, completely, and deeply. And something that I think that we've experienced is not, I think I know we've experienced is such a deep love between us. Like, we love each other so deeply. And I think a lot of people that are going to be listening to this are people in a space where they've signed up for a life where they're going to come into really deep connection with themselves. And to come into really deep connection with yourself, you then are also saying, I wish to come into really deep connection with others. And so you're going to be people that are having these experiences of really, really big love. Also, we're going to do a whole episode on this, but there's a big difference between big love and heavily trauma bonded experiences. But you know, what I'm talking about between Dave and I is we had this deep soul knowing, remembering that we had done this before in lifetimes and we were here to do this in this lifetime. And I remember this feeling of just total confusion of like, I don't know how the fuck to get from where I am to where I know I'm supposed to be. But the love that we had really held us in this through literally what seemed at some times like beyond reasonable measure.
Yes.
And what I would really desire, what I dream of being able to give to people is to support them to not feel quite as lost as we did through that process. It's still going to be overwhelming at times because that's everyone's individual thing. And a part of the initiation is walking through that confusion. But what I really just dream of for people is that they can be in the bigness of that love and feel a bit of that confusion of how do I get from where we are to where I know that we can be, but to almost find some restedness in that journey and to trust that love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just want to actually just voice, I don't know whether I'd said this to you before, but I feel like such a big reason why we're together is because of your love. That's like your sharing of your love for me, and just like the intensity of it, I feel like in a large way kept us together. Yeah.
Thank you, baby.
Very welcome.
Yeah. It was really there from the beginning too, wasn't it? You know, like the last episode when we shared that you were like, I don't see this as a long-term thing. I'm like, that's okay, because I love you and I know. And yeah, that just sort of grew and grew. And yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Very welcome.
So to continue the storytelling, so we had these few months of challenges, well, you know, the beginnings of our challenges, and we did quite a few trips back and forth to Melbourne to pick up your things and cars. And we one night did a border dash because obviously we're still in the realm of COVID times. And yeah, one night we did 2 border dashes actually, but the first time we did one, we sat in a queue at the border for 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
And I think our nervous systems were really just, we'd learned how to be alone and to manage ourselves. And then coming into this intensity of this union, our nervous systems were just fucking jacked.
Yeah, particularly on my side as well. Like, I was in Melbourne, I had no interaction with anyone.
Yeah.
And moving from literally spending not like that, whatever it was, 10 months basically not seeing anyone to full-time contact. It was intense. And then also moving through the relationship stuff as well and all those patterns. Yeah.
And then to a city where you didn't know anybody. And yeah. And so I remember it was late April and we were having quite a challenging moment, and I had my first night where we had this blow up and I was like, I can't fucking stay here, and went to stay with a friend and sort of took the weekend out. And I feel like that kind of really started this yo-yo cycle that we went into, where we would have these really big, intense challenges and fights, and like they would get fiery. Like, we're not going to go deeply into our human designs here, but fuck, Dave and I designed our stars this lifetime to have a lot of fire and a lot of we've really had to learn to not buy into our shadow behaviors when challenges come up, because we spent 2 years running around in circles in our shadows and our shadow reactivity and feeding off of each other. And so we started this cycle of big fight, kind of blowing the fuses on the fuse board, backing off, but then going, fuck, I don't want to lose this love. Like, this is the most important thing. And then coming back and, you know, being like, yep, things need to change, da, 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 da. And then there's an awareness of both of us of that. And then coming back into this big passionate love and things being okay for a while, but then nothing really being resolved, the same things repeating, and then having another blow up. And I'd love in a moment for you to speak to how you felt about that. Like, for me, I could feel micro changes happening, but because I felt this pressure of, I have to be perfect, this has to be perfect, otherwise he's going to leave, he's going to pack his things and go back to Melbourne, like, this has to be perfect. I knew that there were micro changes. In the beginning, they were very, very slow. And then, you know, we did end up having a pop through moment that was really large. But I couldn't convey to you, I really understand, particularly in hindsight, that to you, it looked like nothing was changing. And I know that that was really challenging for you.
Yes. Well, it's funny because even just in talking about what the key moments were for this, like this period of time, like I don't remember, I have trouble remembering details like that. So what was actually really useful is, yeah, I would forget, but you would also remind me and kind of say like, hey, there has been change. What about this? What about this? And that was, yeah, that was super powerful. That was powerful for me and really dropped me into the reality of there being change and that there has been change.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just really feeling as well how that, like what you just shared before about my love, I'd got to a place in my own personal relationship with myself that my love wasn't just for you. It was also for me. And it's a lot bigger now than it was then, but I can also feel ways in which I was advocating for myself. I wasn't just allowing that narrative of nothing has changed. I was like, but hang on a second, it actually has. I know that it has, and these are the ways that it has. And yes, there are other ways that there is still plenty of change to go. And I'm here for it. Like, I know one thing that has really supported you to stay in this relationship is my willingness, and we're going to have a big chat about that. But I was always prepared to go, yeah, here for it. Originally, it took me longer to get those words out of my mouth. There was still a fight in me. And if I could give women an advice, and maybe this is applicable for men too, but I'll speak to women, it's like, do whatever you can, learn resources, skills, get mentored, find it in yourself. There is a place inside you that is pure softness and willingness and a readiness to love and be loved. And when you're not connected to that feeling, you're scared. There is a fear there, and you are trying to protect yourself, and you don't have to. And when I started to learn that, things really changed quickly for us. But in the beginning, it took me a really long time to understand that. And that would perpetuate and drag our fights out quite a lot.
Yes. And like in those moments where I was saying that nothing had changed, that was in the moments of frustration.
Yeah.
Once things had cooled down, once we'd both cooled down, there was, like, of course, there was greater perspective. Like when we're reactive, we tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the shadow can just want to find any way
Yeah. And so then we keep meandering through the year, having these experiences, and then somewhere along the line, Dave decides to propose. Do you want to tell the story of what was happening for you in that?
Love to. And this isn't something that we've super spoken about, actually.
No. So this was, to give context, it was the 1st of September 2021. We'd met in person on the 17th of December 2020. So 9 months after we'd met, Dave proposed.
Yeah. So for me, what was happening was I was noticing that my tendency was to be avoidant, and to, when there was challenges, to actually take a step back and to remove myself and kind of energetically have one foot out the door. And as I was mentioning, as I've mentioned in a few ways, like that was one thing that I learned when I was growing up. It's like, well, that's how I create change, is by taking a step back. And obviously that's not a healthy or resourceful attachment style, or a way of creating safety in a relationship. So I became acutely aware of my tendency, and there was a diminishing of using that 100% through our relationship. But I was noticing that there was still stories in my mind, and there was this feeling of like, I love this woman, no matter what relationship I'm going to be in, there's going to be challenges like this. There's going to be the same patterns that are showing up, because I'd seen the same patterns in my past relationships. And I just knew that there was such a deep love. And I could also feel like I wanted to complete the cycle. I wanted to complete that cycle for me. I wanted to complete that cycle for you. I wanted to complete that cycle for us. And there was just such a, like, we went on a large journey after that moment, but there was a knowing of this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that is most true, and is the thing that is like an act that is coming from love. To not do that, like what I was doing is I was looking forward. I'm like, if this is what's true, this is what I'm being called to do. And I could see the potentiality if I didn't listen to that intuition of what was going to play out. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was very chaotic, very unhealthy, and just like perpetuating that. So yeah. And it was very much a claiming and an ownership of like, I choose this.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. And then we had a love bubble for a week.
We did
And then
what a beautiful love bubble it was.
Goodness me. And then I feel like shit got real. And for me, certainly a lot of stuff, I can't even really identify now what that stuff was. I just remember that. I remember this feeling, right? And this is the codependence piece. So if you resonate with this, there's something there. I remember this feeling of like almost this exhale of relief. Like it wasn't a trusting, faithful, surrendered exhale. It was like we're engaged now. Everything is going to get better.
Yes.
Right? This clinging on to an external marker, an external label that, thank you, Disney, we have like hung this belief that certain things give us certain outcomes. And I was in for a rude shock when that didn't happen. And I also had a lot of stuff around engagement and marriage. I actually was engaged in my 20s. And when I was a little girl, and a teenager, like I just dreamt of being married, being a wife and having kids and being a homemaker. That literally was what I desired. And I was like, if you'd asked me when I was 15 what I'd be doing when I was 23, it would have involved a husband, a cute house, and 2 kids. And so my heart's desire is to be married, to be a mum, and to run a beautiful home. And my life did not go on that timeline. And thank you very much, life, for that, because it took me on such a beautiful journey to not get into that scenario as just, a picture that looks nice on the wall, but I'm going to get to have that experience in such a deep embodied way. So this engagement that I had, it ended quite unceremoniously. And I'm very thankful and grateful that that did not proceed for numerous reasons. But yeah, I just can feel that there was a lot of murkiness around what engagement meant, and that inside my nervous system from that previous experience, it still felt shaky. And so my mind was telling me, we're all set now, we're sweet, we're engaged, but my body had so much energy in it that needed to come out. And
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your experience about, like, maybe your fears and stuff about being married to me?
I'll touch on that in a moment. But one of the things that I recognized as well was that, this is what needed to happen. And I also knew that it was going to create significant waves in our relationship and bring
Thanks for the heads up.
and bring up pieces that hadn't been fully seen and that were only going to be seen after that type of commitment. Yes. So some of my fears around getting married were similar to what I was speaking about was earlier was that there wasn't going to be change, that it was like I was signing up for what we were experiencing then, and I was saying yes to what was our relational experience then. And that was challenging because I was a no to what we were experiencing then, as I know you were as well. And that was just a huge fear that also that we were going to get down, like that we were going to get married. And then a couple of years later down the track, I realized that nothing's changed. And like these were my worst case stories, or we had kids and I could just see like the rest of my life in this unfulfilling, tumultuous relationship that we were experiencing. Obviously there being love there initially, but like my worst fear was that love was going to erode through the shadowiness that was going to play out, and there was just going to be resentment. And that was what I was modeled as well in relationships. So that was definitely very much my fear. And then potentially staying for a sense of duty, which again was somewhat what I was modeled as well.
I feel like it's important we haven't really spoken about this in this forum much yet, but something that we're both really passionate about, and what we, I guess, really desire and dream of sharing and supporting people with is, on your side, this revolution of masculinity and this real it was like a remembering and a reclamation of the divine template of true, strong masculinity. And for me, this remembering of true femininity, and not what we're seeing on social media, and not what's being portrayed in the goddess movement, but this true remembering of the divinity of the feminine. And that is really what we were journeying and what you were trying to lead me to. And I also didn't understand. I couldn't actually understand what you wanted from me because of, I'm going to be a little bold here, but because of a lot of the crap that I was reading and seeing on the internet about what being feminine woman means. And I couldn't understand, particularly like as someone that runs my own business and is a coach and mentor, and in that space with a lot of content creators, a lot of female content creators that do all this feminine stuff. I didn't know how to calibrate. I didn't even know how to hear what you were saying, because it was so conflicting to the glorified message that I was receiving across the internet. And things really started to change for me when I realized that I was mainly seeing this content from people that were either single women or in inversely polarized relationships or depolarized relationships. And when I started to tune out of that and to remember myself, and to remember that little girl that desired that relationship of that marriage and those kids and that family, and to tune into, well, what do I actually want my days to feel like? What do I want my nervous system to feel like? What do I want my husband to be like? that was actually when I started to feel this remembering of what it means to be a woman in response to the leadership of a man. And I'm so fucking blessed and so grateful that I have a man that is here to revolutionize masculinity. And, I really do feel like we are these anchors of remembering of this particular relating template of men that want to be men, and that women that deeply yearn to be women and held by men.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't plan on lifting the lid off of that one today. That bold statement.
Yeah. What else is sticking out to you as sort of key moments? We've got one of the other things that I put down was about putting the wedding
Got one. Oh, what was that, darling?
Putting the wedding on hold.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say too. So we'd planned to get married on the 22nd of February 2022 because 22222.
All about the numbers.
All the twos. And things were just not getting better for us. I remember us having a huge fight on the 1st of January and just being like, oh my God, I don't want to start the year like this. And we're supposed to be getting married in 8 weeks.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was significant. A few weeks later, you actually were going to go back to Melbourne. So that fear that I'd been holding that whole time of this has to be perfect or he's going to pack up his stuff and go, it arrived. And you were adamant that you were going to leave and that you were going to go back to Melbourne. And what ended up happening was that I left for, I think it was about 9 days or something. I went to go and stay with a friend and we didn't speak. I suppose it was somewhat of a break, if we have to label it and give words to it, but it wasn't like, I went and we were still in contact. We didn't speak for, wow, I can feel my belly is feeling, it was big time. It was really big because I knew that the fears that I'd been carrying, I was manifesting them. And I still didn't know how to change. I didn't, even though there had been micro changes, I still remember this deep feeling of confusion of like, how do I actually do what this man is asking of me? And this is in a relationship where the man actually knew and was able to communicate. There are people listening to this that are not being led like I was being led. And it's so important that we have people speaking about these traditional gender roles for people that want to relate in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. And so, instead of you going to Melbourne, I kind of threw this white flag into the ring and was like, well, how about I go? How about I give you space? And again, that was still the same thing of like taking space, realizing how much we love each other and coming back in. I think it was around that time we started talking about moving to Queensland, actually. It was sort of in February.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
It was. It was challenging for me moving to a new place and also having a relationship that was challenging. And like I wrote a post recently about a man's mission comes first, and that's one of the lies that perpetuates unhealthy relationships and just unhealthy attachment styles. And that in their highest frequency, relationships and sort of like a mission or career or whatever it is, whatever label it is, that they again they're interdependent. They support each other, and within that unit, they become stronger. And when one part of our lives is struggling and having big challenges, that it can affect other places. And that was my experience. I was finding it really challenging being in Adelaide in a new place, coming out of COVID, and then also with this challenge that it seemed like we were frequently having large challenges that were very nervous system draining and Another way to frame it would be healing, that all the pieces were coming up for healing, and they actually were. And it was actually just our resistance, well, speaking for myself, it was my resistance to what was coming up that was actually the most tiring. And just to touch on one of the key things that I was exploring was this dance between solidarity of this is where we're moving, this is like sort of like leading the relationship, the solidarity of my vision for the relationship with compassion for our humanness and what was actually going on. And I found the solidarity quite easy and the compassion more challenging, because the compassion opened me up to the vulnerability of, if I open myself, my fears were rising that things weren't going to change, and that stepping into the compassion and the acceptance was going to mean that I began tolerating things that were like, basically I was going to betray myself. So there was this very big dance and finding balance within those that I was experiencing. It was a very big time. Yeah.
And I found that dance really hard to, well, it was impossible to calibrate to, because it was stimulating my feeling of that feeling that I had when we got engaged. I'm like, oh, everything is fine now. So when you would be in the pole of the solidarity, and yet we're here, we're in this, I see the vision for this relationship, we can do it, I love you, I would fall into that. It was like I would collapse into that, rather than, what we do now is this more exalted holding type energy, but I would like collapse into that, and then ultimately not embody what we had spoken about.
Yes.
Which would then flip you into the, no, fuck this, I'm not going to sacrifice everything myself, I'm not going to abandon myself to be in this, which would then like send me into chaos of, but I thought you said you loved me and this was safe, and so I couldn't trust you because what I didn't know at any point what was going to happen. And I understood this pattern. I began to feel quite suspicious isn't the word, like suspicious, tentative. Every time we would have the loving moments, I was kind of waiting for the backlash of that. But again, like what I really want to say about that, if anyone is like, yeah, I get that, like he's not this and I can't calibrate to him, and it actually had nothing to do with you. And in the end, and we're going to go into this so much more in the next episode, but in the end, it was my deep connection to myself and God, like call that faith, spirit, divine, ultimate knowing of love, the love that exists inside of me, as me, and outside of me, everywhere, that became my ultimate safety, which meant that it wasn't all on you to give me a point of calibration.
Yes.
And beautifully, now that I have taken that off of your shoulders and can do that for myself, it has created the space needed for you to step into that. And you are that for me now. And then also when you're having your own journeys, processes, experiences, you're busy with work, whatever it is, I don't crumble. But I literally outsourced my entire way of calibration to you.
Yes. And it's an impossible standard to live up to.
Yeah.
Because if we're doing that and we're reliant on something external, and we're in that as well, we're not taking full responsibility for our own pieces that come up.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if I was perfect. It wouldn't matter if you were perfect. There is going to be things that trigger and that seem real to that part of us that's in fear. Like fear is just constantly looking. It's like, oh shit, I'm afraid of that tree right there because it moved. Like, oh, it's more a shadow. And it's like, these things aren't real, but they can feel real. And Yeah, that was one of the, when I was reflecting on some of the key messages for this one, it was a lot just about, like, looking back on it, about self-responsibility. And this is the hallmark of interdependence. It's this paradox that one person can change the dynamic in a relationship, that can break the cycle. And that paradoxically, when we row our, like, as my friend Janie says, it's like if we swim in our own lane, or as Janie says, row our own canoe, then that's like the best path forward to also create a healthy relationship. Because if, regardless of anything that you did, regardless of anything that I did, if we were just responsible for our own reactions, that cuts the cycle. Because what I experienced was, I said something, you reacted, or vice versa, but it was like the other person's reaction to that. It's like we just kept on reacting off each other, and there was just a cycle, a downward cycle, straight to fucking straight to hell. And with that with one person breaking the reactivity, then that cycle is complete. Because it was so challenging to break, because we were both feeding off each other within that reactivity, that it just kept on perpetuating the stories. It didn't create the space. It didn't create the space for healing and for love to enter. I actually just want to touch on that. Yeah, this obviously this love story that we've been on, and this exploration of our journey together is one of a couple of years. And I actually just wanted to bring it back for myself, just for a moment, of where I've been working on my reactivity actively for 14, 15 years. And this is one of the things about just having acceptance, that these things can take time, and they can change in a moment. And also there can be long periods of time that it takes to unwind these traits and these unconscious behaviors from our nervous system. Like 15, 14 years ago, when I started doing this stuff, I was a nuclear bomb. The reactivity was so strong in me. And I was actually just kind of laughing to myself, because it's something that I notice in like, there's different ways that when there's like our nervous system responds in different ways: freeze, flight, or fight. And my natural inclination is generally towards fight. And it's a funny thing to notice. Yeah. One of the ways that it's funny is, like, I'll walk down the street, and if a dog barks, I will bark back. like I won't get ready to run. I'll like get ready to fight this dog that's just barked at me. And it's been a deep process of unwinding that response, that defensive response, when you react to me, or if there's something that triggers me in some way. It's like holding that desire to bark back, and to actually come out and like try and fight.
Yeah, I would love to share something about reactivity.
Yes, absolutely.
So my experience of that was, I'm also a highly reactive person. My dad once described me as, this is classic for someone that's trying to tell you that you're reactive, but not get you to then react. Like, how do you tell someone that they're reactive without then copying their reaction? But he described me as, you can be a little bit prickly, which was, I wasn't happy with that. I definitely had a reaction. But yeah, I'm highly reactive person as well. And what I began to realize as the pattern, as Dave kind of just described there, was I was in this feeling of like, everything always ends up about me and what I'm doing wrong, because I was having the bigger reaction. I was having the initial reaction. So Dave would do something that was not conducive to our highest experience in this relationship, and I would have a reaction, but my reaction was so explosive and so big and so violent. We need to at some point have an episode about women being violent with their emotions. I was so violent and volatile in my reaction to you that, like you're describing, you then reacted to me and you went in to fight me. And then I was like, I'm not going to fucking let you win this fight. And we would just end up in this challenge. And I had this awareness. I began to develop this awareness that I could see what was happening, that my reaction was detracting from us even being able to see the thing that you were doing. So we were living in this echo chamber where everything was my fault. Everything was my reaction. And I knew that I had to be able to get to a point where I didn't react, where I could leave enough spaciousness for us to even have the opportunity, for you to even have the opportunity to see your part. And I didn't know how to do that without shutting down. I remember trying it sometimes and I would go ice cold, and instead of reacting and blowing up, I would just shut down. But that was still a reaction. And that still pissed you off just as much as me having this large reaction. And a body of work that we both work with quite a lot and have had a lot of healing through is the Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. And I'm sure it's in the 49th Gene Key, which has the shadow of reactivity. And one of the things that Richard says in that just helped me so much. And he says, you only have to not react once. You only ever have to not react one time. And what he was saying in that is just once, don't react. That is a huge difference. And then when you've not reacted that one time, just do it another time, sometime, just don't react again. And it's not like, because I was setting myself up for failure in this thing of like, I have to stop reacting permanently. When I'd been reactive for 35 years, it's in my astrology, it's in my gene keys, it's in my human design. And in the shadow frequency of that aspect of all of that astrology, it is highly reactive and not conducive to relationships. And there is a really exalted high frequency of that as well. But I was stuck in the shadow of it. And I was stuck trying to never, ever react again. And when I started to just coach myself and mentor myself that just once, be loving presence. And when I was able to start doing that, that really helped us as well, because it did create that space for you to be contemplative with how you'd engaged. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, like if someone does something that we don't appreciate or we don't like or whatever, and we react to that super strongly, it can really detract from the core thing, like the initial thing. Because my experience was, it's like, oh yeah, I did this thing, and I wasn't in denial that what I did was not right. And there definitely was a responsibility from me. But in that moment, my focus was, again, not one of compassion and acceptance of your reactivity. Mine was my biggest challenge was like, yeah, we're both going to do things that annoy or trigger or whatever, frustrate each other. But my biggest thing was we need to be able to talk about it with reactivity. But the thing was, you were reacting against what I did, and then I was reacting against your reaction. And then you were reacting because I didn't acknowledge that first thing, and then I was reacting off your reaction. And
I'd love to see a video now of a fight that we had 2 years ago and just be like, oh,
yeah.
it would be gnarly.
It would actually really
terrible
do that. It would actually, if we had the ability, because it's like, oh, that right there, that's the moment.
Yeah.
That's the moment.
Yeah. I was a terrible listener. I was so stuck in protecting myself and trying to protect the relationship. I was in this chaotic, really, really, not even just heightened nervous system, but well and truly overstimulated, desperate. I was in a state of desperation, and I could not listen to you. I couldn't rest enough into myself, into the faith in myself, into my faith in God. I was trying to carry everything myself. And I could not just sit there and be the presence to what you were saying, because every time you needed to share something that was true on your heart, I had a fear that it was going to mean you were breaking up with me. I had a fear that I was going to lose the thing that was most important to me, and I didn't know how to cope or survive without that. And something I just really want to be clear with to women is, when I said before about Dave, I had to learn to not just calibrate off of Dave, because the feminine is always trying to calibrate to the masculine. And that is like the feminine energy is trying to be held by the masculine energy. That is, otherwise it's just free and wild and feels unsafe because it doesn't know the space of the container that it's moving in. And we're going to talk about this a lot. This is a huge theme of what we have embodied in our relationship. And it's not your classic, typical stuff that you see on the internet either that we'll be sharing with you. So when I'm saying that I had to learn to not calibrate to him, please don't mistake that for thinking that I was calibrating to myself and thinking that I had to hold it all myself and that I had to have my own inner masculine and I was calibrating to that. That is the independent model that people are stuck in. And there's a lot of work in the industry that is helping people come into independence, and not a lot that then graduates you from independence into interdependence. And interdependence is not possible while you are your own source of masculine calibration.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to invite specific questions or curiosities from anybody listening that wants to put us in a direct response to an experience even that you're having. Like if you have a question, you're like, hey, I'm experiencing this, and you want us to actually bring that into the episode, obviously without mentioning you, and use that as an example, and let us know.
Because that's one thing that I love about Richard Rudd's work with the gene keys is he speaks about anything of the highest frequency is paradoxical, and interdependence is paradoxical, because I am independent, I am my own person, but also in this relationship, like you are in an incredibly healthy way, like you are my kind of expression of femininity as I am with masculinity, and our relationship flows so beautifully inside that container. And we talk about like marriage being the joining and the union and becoming of one body, and like all this stuff is written about and spoken about, but we've lost so many of the deep meanings of it. And there's such a fulfillment that I've experienced in that, in the giving over of like, oh, I don't have to be in my feminine, I don't have to be connected to my feminine. Yeah.
So we're going to start wrapping this up, and a little bit of a storytelling to take you to where we're going to start next episode. So we postponed the wedding, and that was fucking hard. That was really traumatic for me. It brought up a lot of shame, not even guilt, mainly shame and fear. I mean, everything that's not love is fear, but this like scaredness that I wasn't going to get to marry this man, and pressure, like so much pressure to try and fix this thing so that I could marry him. And when we put the wedding off, that was in February, I did it. I remember this so clearly, just being like, I'm it's ridiculous thinking about it. Like, I'm happy to postpone this February wedding if you agree that we will get married in May.
I remember that as well.
And it's like, I look at that now and I see it. That was me grasping for control. I had no ability to truly, truly surrender into the mystery of what was unfolding between us. And I'm not in judgment of myself of that at all. Like, I'm in deep acceptance of that version of Amy. And like, I love her. I see how she was starting to open and starting to blossom, but was just fucking scared. And anyway, May also came and went, but I knew that Dave was suffocating in Adelaide. That feels like a good word for it. Does that resonate with you?
Yep.
Yeah. like just suffocating, and that I was the one keeping us there. And in the end, I was just like, let's leave Adelaide. Like that was my last ditch thing that I'd clung on to, not leaving Adelaide. But then I was like, let's go, let's leave Adelaide. And then we were in the middle of a rental, a countrywide rental crisis. And I just had this brainwave of, let's go house sitting. Let's pack up, let's sell all our furniture, and go house sitting. And this was, I can feel it in my chest now, that this was really big for me, because I literally was giving up every part of the independence that I'd created, that I'd built in this little unit. I had had my little safety that I'd finally landed in. And yeah, I then was like, let's pack it all up. Like, I'm going to sacrifice everything. And this also weaves into the love that Dave was speaking about. Like, I was willing to sacrifice everything that gave me safety and security, and have no home, no address, no furniture, no possessions, in a bid to give Dave what he needed to be able to regulate, because I knew that I was pushing shit uphill trying to get him to be able to regulate his own nervous system somewhere that he was so unhappy. And I knew that I was going to have to make massive sacrifice. Hello, city of my life's work, Gene Key. But I was going to have to make sacrifice to have a chance at this working.
Yes.
Yeah. How did it feel for you in that?
Yeah, well, originally I was planning on moving to Queensland until I met you. So that was also a factor as well. And yeah, it was just the whole mix of just being in a new place and yeah, the challenges that we were experiencing, and not having, I love going camping and forward driving and stuff. And that Adelaide's just so different from Melbourne. It's shockingly different. Particularly on that front as well, like camping. Victoria and Queensland are some of the most camping outdoor friendly. Yeah, like you just go out into the bush. You just go out into the bush, find a camp spot. You don't need to pay. You don't need to. There's all types of different forward driving. So I was just way out of sync. And previously that had been a way for me to come back into sync. So yeah. Awesome. So my intention was for this to be a reasonably short episode.
I think it's only an hour.
Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be shorter than that, but there's just
not me, babe, not me. I knew it would be an hour. You know, I love it. Good.
Yeah, and there's just so many things for us to talk about. Yeah.
I feel like we've done less storytelling and more, but it's awesome. I know that this is going to just be super, super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in for part 2 of our love story. And we're very excited to dive into part 3. This has really been like the deep dive into the challenges. And yeah, we're excited to share the flowering.
Yeah. So part 3 is going to be bringing us up to this point that we're in now. And it's really laying the foundation for everything that we're sharing, so that, you know, there's this really, I just have this sense of letting you guys in and letting you guys in to have a closeness with us, and to understand that what we're speaking about and what we're going to be speaking about, you know, when there's just an episode that's about a particular thing, you understand that it's come from a foundation of really navigating a lot to arrive to where we are, and that the things that we are sharing, we have discovered these ourselves. You know, obviously we've been influenced by certain people that we follow and content that we receive and teachings, particularly the Gene Keys. But yeah, we've allowed this to be a discovery for us so that we can share that with you. And again, I just want to really invite specific and direct questions. We've been having such beautiful messages from people that are loving the content, loving listening to it. It's bringing stuff up for them. And if there's ever anything that you want to ask and be like, hey, this is going on in my relationship, can you speak to this? Please, please, please send it through. We thrive on that.
Absolutely. Because conversations about relationships are so important as well. They are the relationships relationships are, of course, the foundation of society, and it's not something that we think about. But our relationships in so many ways have become, or have been, and are quite unhealthy for a lot of people. That's their experience. And so much of it we do in isolation, and through actually just being part of a conversation and a discussion and bringing realness. Like Amy and we've got nothing to hide about ourselves or our relationship, and our core intention is to be of service and to just share and create discussions around relationships that have the intention of being of service and to moving you towards a more healthy, resourceful relationship dynamics, rather than sharing. It's so easy to share in like little communities where it's like we can become stuck in our own bubbles. And are they actually, is the intention for sharing and being in conversation moving forward, or it can be very easy just to be stuck in pain cycles. So yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just want you all to remember that there is nothing coming up for you. There is nothing coming up in your relationship that you can't handle. There's two things. There's love and there's fear. And fear is love that has forgotten its origins. Fear is love that has forgotten its origins. And there are no fears that you can have that love cannot transform. And trust where you are. Trust where you are in your relationships. Trust where life has taken you. Trust that it's there for a reason, and that there is something deeper in you that is desiring to be met and loved and accepted. Yeah.
This is the Sacred Vow. My name's David A. Charles. This is Amy Lee Martin, and